Hello, my name is Allison Carmen, and welcome to my podcast, 10 Minutes to Less Suffering. And the name of today's podcast is Can You Be Sad, Stressed, and Happy at the Same Time? And the reason why this is my focus today is there's a lot going on in the news, there's a lot going on in the world, and there's a lot going on in our lives. And although we might not feel sadness, stress, and happiness in one single moment, all of us surely have things in our lives that if we focused on could make us sad, stressed, or happy. And yes, there are ways to handle our sadness, handle our stress, foster our happiness. But first we have to see that there's a cycle of life and we can't skip the feeling part. We can't skip the process part. But when we're willing to see the ebb and flow, when we're willing to understand that so many things exist at once, that we can go through the cycle of how we feel and process our suffering. We can choose to be more grateful. We could choose to look at uncertainty as a friendly place. So as we're going through these different cycles, maybe we won't dip as much. Maybe we'll have an underlying peace. But again, believing that the chaos is going to end, waiting for the problem to end, to be happy, and to always be resisting our feelings. We might find that we stay in the sadness and the stress and we don't always get to feel the depth of our happiness. So how can we do this? We know that there are things that make us sad. And the truth is, the best way to deal with our sadness is to feel our sadness. If we go off and we numb ourselves or we avoid it, often that sadness lingers. It stays within us and it catches us at different times. There are certain things in life that are going to make us feel sad. There are world events that are going to make us feel sad. There are things that happen in our lives. People are going to leave our lives. There are things that are going to make us feel this way. And the most important thing in these moments is to say, I feel sad. Is to feel it, is to honor it. I almost look at it like a cycle. That when we allow ourselves to feel, sometimes it'll just pass. So sometimes that cycle is feeling, relaxing the body, allowing, and it'll just pass. Sometimes there's a situation that's more difficult. So then we feel the sadness. Maybe we feel loss. Maybe we feel missing. And as we're feeling that loss, if we're allowing, then we are also opening. And we will see new things start to come in. We will see that sadness fill up less of our day, but we have to allow it, to process it, to let it pass, to learn our lessons. And also while that's happening, we have to remember there are other things going on in our lives that we can welcome. Knowing there's something sad in our lives, but also knowing the sun rises. Also know there might be a beautiful business opportunity. There might be someone new to meet. We let the things that we don't like sink us because we're telling the story that this is happening and this is our lives. And if we pull back, even if we're allowing our feelings, even if we're in the cycle, there's often other things happening too. And when we allow that, as we process it, the sadness could move over and something else can take center stage. And then there's something like stress. But stress is very different than a feeling of sadness. Stress is actually a resistance to the moment. So stress is something you could play with in a different way. Because if you're stressed, often you're telling the story that what's happening in your life cannot get better. Whatever you're trying to do, you're never going to accomplish. You're in the future while you're working on the moment. And that's why, again, I always talk about this beautiful relationship with uncertainty. Because if you know that the unknown brings good things too, if you know that uncertainty is a place of hope, if you know that nobody knows what's going to happen next. And when people sell you stress and despair, they're just clinging on to certainty when we cannot know. There's always hope in the unknown. So when you're feeling stressed, that's something you could actually let go of. And again, you could listen to many of my podcasts where I talk about the maybe practice, which always helps me. It always reminds me that we can't know what's going to happen next. And that means good things can happen too, that we could accept it and still be okay. That maybe there's a new possibility, maybe there's a new opportunity. So here we are. We have a sad thing maybe happening in our lives, and maybe we had something that was stressing us out at work or something with our child, but we're able to let that piece go. And as we let it go, we end up more in the moment. And that's where most of our happiness is generated from. When we're able to let go of what we're resisting, when we're not projecting into the future, and we land in the moment. And often there are some beautiful things in our lives. There are beautiful, wonderful people in our lives, things that we love, and yet we're always willing to put them aside and let sadness and stress take center stage. But when we start processing and when we start alleviating our stress through a different perspective, happiness has more of a chance. Joy and gratitude and peace have more of a chance to be the center. So at any point in our lives, there can be something that makes us sad, something that makes us stressed, something that makes us happy. Different circumstances, different things. Yet we don't realize that perspective and processing and allowing and not resisting and changing our relationship with uncertainty. We get to choose where we land every day. And I know I keep using the phrase center stage, but it's really our choice at some point. So yes, all these things exist. And even though they exist, the sadness, the stress, the joy, we still have a right to welcome this moment and make the most of it. But if something comes in and we're saying, no, I have to be happy, when there's sadness, when there's suffering, it's much better to allow it, to feel it, to process it, to choose a different perspective, to acknowledge your stress and acknowledge the fact that you were afraid that the future looks bleak, and create a better relationship with uncertainty. Look at it as a place of hope, as a place of refuge. And let's allow the joy and the happiness at the same time, and let's do things that make us happy. Just because there's something going on in the world or something going on in our lives doesn't mean that we can't have happiness in the moment. Doesn't mean we can't pursue our goals and our dreams. And laughter, why not laugh as much as we possibly can? We shouldn't waste a moment. And if we open our heart and we allow ourselves to feel things deeply, life will become more meaningful, and then we get more connected with who we are. Sometimes the feelings and emotions take over. We merge with them instead of saying, wait a second, it's just a feeling, it's just a thought. How do I feel if I center myself? How do I feel if I realize these experiences I'm having are outside of me? Sometimes when you just go back to your heart and you breathe, the joy and the happiness comes in. Because sometimes you feel so grateful just to be alive, and that alone is an underlying joy. Or you just take a walk in the forest or in a field, and nature reminds you of that, or a loved one reminds you of that. So even though other things are happening, there can be an inner joy and there can be an inner peace. But all I know is that when I am mindful of my feelings and I'm mindful of my thoughts, I do have more happiness in my life. And it's not forced. It comes from processing all the things I feel, remembering my relationship with uncertainty, being grateful for what I have, and connecting with myself and everything that I love in the world, and keeping my heart open. And you can do this. You could have a life filled with all of these things, and it could still be a good life. It's just about remembering everything that's in our lives. Remembering that we can't feel bad enough to make the world a better place, but we can feel good enough and choose those things every day. Remembering that uncertainty is our best friend, because we don't know what's going to happen next. We could still find our way. Miracles could happen. Good things could happen too. We could open our heart and welcome the unknown. Our lives are only finite when we shut down and we believe that one feeling we're having or one thought we're having is going to dictate the rest of our lives. But when we could have a better perspective and know that life has many different things in it, and things come and go, and there's a place within us that's always sturdy, then we live in the field of infinite possibilities. So even if you're feeling really sad these last couple of days or stressed, don't forget all the joy and all the happiness. And don't believe that things can't get better, because nobody knows the future. And for all we know, maybe the best is yet to come. Thank you for listening to this podcast today. If you'd like to get in touch with me, you could email me at allison@allisoncarmen.com. If you'd like to buy my books, The Gift of Maybe or A Year Without Men, they're available at all major bookstores or online retailers. And if you like this podcast, you could subscribe and leave a comment.